The first signs appeared without warning as strange disturbances rippled through Earth's atmosphere in the dead of night. At first, it was subtle flashes of light in the sky, followed by irregular pulses of energy coming from the distant reaches of space. No one knew what to make of it. Scientists were baffled at the sudden surge in electromagnetic activity across the planet, as if some great force had stirred just beyond the visible stars. At first, it was dismissed as natural phenomena, but soon these unexplained events grew too frequent to ignore. The pulse of energy was unlike anything humanity had encountered before. Its origins could not be traced. No technology known to humankind could explain what was happening. Days passed, and the patterns began to emerge. Something was approaching, but what could it be? How could Earth's best minds be so utterly blind to the truth that was slowly unveiling itself? When the ships finally arrived, no one was ready. The sky was darkened by their shadow. The ships were enormous, each one a floating mountain. Their smooth metallic surfaces glistened under the distant light of the stars, their sheer size enough to block out the moon. As they positioned themselves above Earth's major cities, not a single word was spoken, not a single radio transmission was received. Only a thick silence descended upon the world. The strange energy that had heralded their arrival now pulsated steadily from their core. Humanity waited, frozen in disbelief, their eyes glued to the heavens. No one dared to make a move. No one spoke for a long time. They all felt it, a strange weight pressing down on them, as if the very air had thickened. The tension was unbearable. And then, without warning, the broadcast came, not a voice or a sound, but a message projected into every mind across the world. It was not a language spoken, it was a thought shared directly into the consciousness of every human alive. A simple message, a cold command. We are the Sci-Fi. You will submit, or you will perish. The words lingered like a shadow in the minds of all who heard them. There was no emotion in the message, no malice, just an undeniable certainty that this was a demand from a force that could not be denied. Panic spread like wildfire. Humanity did not know how to respond. There had never been an enemy like this. No history or record had prepared them for such an encounter. Earth's leaders scrambled to react as their militaries were put on high alert. Satellites were launched into orbit to track the ships, but every attempt to understand the invaders fell short. It was as if the Sci-Fi existed on a plane of existence far beyond human comprehension. Each ship emanated a presence so overwhelming that even the most advanced weapons seemed trivial against them. And the worst part of it was that the Sci-Fi did not even move. They simply watched and waited as Earth's forces fumbled to assemble any sort of defense. They remained silent for what seemed like an eternity before the first devastating strike came. With no warning, a single pulse from one of the ships obliterated a large portion of the city of New York, leaving nothing but a smoldering crater in its wake. This single act of destruction was enough to send shockwaves throughout the world. The power the Sci-Fi held was incomprehensible. They were not just invaders, they were gods in comparison. And yet all they had done was deliver a message. Humanity was no longer at the top of the food chain. They were no longer safe. The world watched in horror as the devastation spread. The death toll from the destruction of New York was unimaginable, and yet it was only the beginning. The broadcast from the Sci-Fi ships had been clear and unyielding: surrender or perish. But how could humanity surrender to something so far beyond its understanding? How could any nation lay down its weapons in the face of such overwhelming power? And yet in the days that followed, every government on Earth struggled with the same question. The world's leaders met in secret councils. Frantic discussions were held in the halls of power, but no one had any answers. How could humanity possibly stand against gods? As the cities of the world lay in ruins, and humanity's fear of annihilation grew stronger, the Sci-Fi showed no signs of aggression beyond their single demonstration of power. At first it seemed as though they were waiting for a response, testing humanity's resolve. The time between their arrival and the first attack had been agonizing, but now the silence was deafening. Every hour felt like an eternity as the world held its breath, but soon the waiting came to an end. The first official strike came on a quiet morning. Without warning, a blinding light erupted from the skies above London, a beam of energy so intense that it could be seen from across the entire continent. It hit with such force that the ground shook for miles, and then there was nothing left of the city but ash and smoke. The air was thick with the scent of burning ruins. As the world scrambled to comprehend what had just happened, humanity had not even begun to organize a defense before the next attack came. This time, it was Paris, and then Tokyo, and then every major city in the world felt the wrath of the Sylphari. In the face of such destruction, there were no words, no cries of defiance, no chance to retaliate. The Sylphari's weapons were beyond anything humanity had ever conceived of. Their ships unleashed beams of pure energy that tore through buildings and landscapes as if they were made of paper. The sheer scale of their power made it clear humanity stood no chance against such an enemy. The resistance from Earth's forces was nothing more than a nuisance. The Sylphari did not even need to fight their enemies directly. They simply waited for the humans to reveal their positions and then destroyed them effortlessly. The world watched as the survivors of each city were scattered into the wilderness, their homes and families reduced to nothing more than memories. It was a battle that was over before it had even begun. Humanity had no recourse, no escape. The Sylphari were everywhere, and their power was absolute. Yet, even in the face of such hopelessness, a spark of defiance remained somewhere deep within the hearts of those who had survived. This was not the end, not yet. But the question remained, how could they fight back against gods who could erase entire cities with the flick of a wrist? As the world reeled from the attack, the first whispers of resistance began to form among the survivors. It started with small groups in the wilderness and in the hidden corners of cities where the Sylphari could not reach, but it was clear to everyone who had witnessed the destruction that humanity's future was no longer guaranteed. The world would have to find a way to fight back, or face complete extinction, and somewhere deep in the underground chambers of the resistance, the search for a solution had already begun. In the days after the initial devastation, a sense of hopelessness began to settle over the survivors. The world's great cities, once symbols of human achievement, lay in ruins. There was no one left to turn to for help. Humanity had been reduced to fractured groups, struggling to stay alive in the shadow of the Sylphari's overwhelming power. Yet even in this darkest hour, whispers began to circulate of something hidden, something long forgotten beneath the surface of human history. It wasn't an idea, but a truth buried deep within the human race itself, a potential long sealed away, waiting to be awakened. It started with a few scattered individuals, historians, archaeologists, and scholars who had studied the ancient records of humankind. They were the ones who began to notice patterns in the old myths, in the stories passed down from generations, stories of humanity's ancestors, tales of beings capable of incredible feats, of powers that no longer seemed possible. At first, it was dismissed as mere legend, a primitive attempt to explain the world in the absence of science. But as the old records were examined more closely, something strange became clear. These ancient stories weren't just myths. They were based on something real. It was in the ruins of long-forgotten libraries that the truth began to emerge. The ancient texts told of a time when humans were not just simple creatures struggling to survive. They were beings of unimaginable power. These powers had been harnessed by the earliest human civilizations, abilities that allowed them to control elements, manipulate energy, and even shape reality itself. But as time passed, these abilities faded. Whether it was through evolution or something else entirely, humanity's true potential was sealed away, forgotten by the very species that had once wielded it. The search for the truth took many forms. Some scoured the ancient ruins of lost cities for hidden knowledge, while others began to experiment with forgotten rituals and techniques from humanity's past. Yet it wasn't until a small group of scientists working in secret discovered the breakthrough that everything began to change. They uncovered something buried deep beneath Earth's surface, something that had remained dormant for millennia. An artifact, an ancient device, capable of unlocking humanity's latent abilities. The discovery was so unexpected that it defied belief, an artifact created by a forgotten race, or perhaps by humanity's own ancestors, that had the power to awaken the dormant potential within every human being. The implications of this discovery were staggering. The artifact wasn't just a relic. It was a key a catalyst that could tap into a wellspring of power buried deep within the human genome. The problem, however, was that no one truly understood how to use it. The knowledge of how to unlock these abilities had been lost over the centuries, and the artifact was only a small piece of the puzzle. But it was a start, and it was a spark of hope that humanity desperately needed. Ilara, a young scientist who had dedicated her life to understanding human potential, was chosen to be the first to test the artifact. She volunteered, knowing the risks, but driven by the desperate need to find a way to fight back against the Sylphari. As the team of researchers activated the device, they could feel the air around them change. Energy surged through Ilara's body, her mind filled with a sense of clarity and strength that she had never experienced before. At first, there was nothing, just the sense of something stirring deep inside her. But then it began. Her senses sharpened, her thoughts became clearer, and she realized with a shock that she could control the flow of energy around her. It wasn't just an external force. She could feel it within herself, coursing through her veins. She could bend light, alter the temperature of the air, and move objects with a thought. The power was overwhelming and beautiful, but it was also terrifying. Ilara had unlocked a part of herself that humanity had long forgotten, and she realized that this power, this potential, was the key to humanity's survival. As Ilara began to master her newfound abilities, the implications of her success became clear. She was not alone. Humanity's true power had been awakened, and now there was hope. The Sylphari had underestimated them, but they would soon learn that humanity was far more than they could ever comprehend. The first spark of resistance had been ignited, and the fight for Earth was about to begin. Ilara stood in front of the mirror, watching the energy swirl around her hands as if it were a living thing. Her mind raced with possibilities. She had only begun to scratch the surface of the power now coursing through her veins, but already she could feel the vastness of it, the raw energy waiting to be shaped and directed. Each time she experimented, she learned more about herself, about the abilities she now possessed. The power was both exhilarating and humbling. She knew that she was not the only one, and that humanity had finally unlocked something it had lost long ago. The process of awakening had begun with her, but it didn't end there. As Ilara's success spread across the underground resistance, more and more humans began to tap into their latent potential. The resistance, once a scattered group of survivors fighting for mere existence, began to take shape into something more formidable. People from all corners of the globe, from every walk of life, felt the stirring of power within them. They began to train, to focus, to harness the incredible abilities they never knew they had. Some learned to manipulate energy like Ilara, bending light and fire at will, while others found they could alter the environment around them, control gravity, or even influence the flow of time. But the journey was not without its difficulties. The power was not easy to control, and many struggled to even comprehend what they were capable of. The mind was not always ready for such a massive shift in understanding. Some who tried to awaken their abilities found themselves overwhelmed, consumed by the very forces they sought to master. The risk of failure was great, and yet, with every failure, humanity grew stronger. Each person who unlocked their abilities was a living testament to the strength of the human spirit and the untapped potential that had been buried within them for centuries. In hidden labs and secret facilities, the resistance worked tirelessly, sharing their knowledge, refining their techniques, and developing methods to accelerate the awakening process. They knew that the Sylphari would not wait for them to prepare. They would strike again, and when they did, humanity would need every advantage it could get. But time was running out. The Sylphari had already shown that they were willing to wipe out entire cities without hesitation. They had proven that they were not invincible, but their power was still far beyond anything humanity had ever faced. As the resistance grew stronger, tensions began to rise. The Sylphari ships hovered in the sky, silent, unyielding. They hadn't made another direct attack, but that didn't mean they weren't preparing for one. It was a waiting game now, and humanity knew that the next move would be theirs. The world was on the brink of something massive. A war was coming, but this time, it would be unlike any battle the Earth had ever seen. Ilara continued to refine her abilities, pushing herself to understand the full extent of her power. She could feel it growing within her, like an unstoppable force building momentum. She knew that she was more than just a soldier now. She was a symbol, a beacon of hope for all of humanity. She had unlocked the first step in a journey that would change the fate of the world. And yet, even as she trained, a question lingered in the back of her mind. What if the Sylphari were not just invaders? What if they knew something humanity did not? What if their arrival wasn't an invasion at all, but a warning? As the resistance continued to awaken, Ilara began to wonder if the true danger facing humanity was not just the Sylphari themselves, but something far greater, something that had been hidden from them for centuries. As the weeks passed, the resistance grew stronger, more coordinated. Across the world, small groups of awakened humans began to join forces, pooling their knowledge and honing their abilities. What had once been a scattered effort, a handful of survivors fighting against insurmountable odds, had turned into a global movement. The Sylphari, for all their power, had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and fight back. But even as humanity's hope grew, so did the tension. The Sylphari were not blind to the growing resistance, and they would not wait forever. Their silence continued, but it was a silence pregnant with menace. The war had only just begun, and humanity had only just started to learn what it could do. Ilara's role in the resistance became more vital with each passing day. As one of the first to unlock her abilities, she was able to train others, helping them understand their newfound powers and how to control them. But even her power had limitations, and she knew the fight ahead would require more than just raw energy. Strategy, cunning, and unity would be the key to overcoming the Sylphari. The resistance began to target smaller Sylphari outposts, launching hit-and-run missions to test their strength and see how the invaders would respond. The Sylphari, for their part, didn't seem to care much for these minor attacks. They were indifferent, almost bored with humanity's defiance. The destruction they had unleashed in the early days of the invasion had been enough to break the will of most of Earth's population, and they believed that would be enough to wipe out any serious resistance. The Sylphari had seen humans as weak and disorganized, but they had failed to recognize something fundamental about the species: humanity's capacity for survival and ingenuity. One of the first major victories for the resistance came when a small team of awakened humans, including Ilara, infiltrated a Sylphari supply depot hidden beneath a mountain range. The mission was dangerous and almost impossible, but it succeeded. The Sylphari were caught off guard when their outpost was sabotaged. They retaliated quickly, but the damage had already been done. Humanity had taken its first real step toward proving that it could challenge the invaders. The Sylphari fleet, for all its might, had been exposed as vulnerable, and that was a crack in their armor that humanity would exploit. But despite the victories, there were still no signs that the Sylphari were going to relent. Instead, they escalated their response. A large portion of their fleet descended on the planet, and this time, they came not to attack the cities but to search for the resistance. It became clear to the survivors that the Sylphari had begun hunting them, actively seeking out anyone who was a threat to their rule. In the shadows, the resistance knew they were running out of time. The Sylphari were intelligent, calculating, and relentless. If humanity was going to survive, they would need to find a way to strike at the heart of the Sylphari's power. The pressure mounted as the resistance began to form its plans for a larger assault. It was clear that their numbers were growing stronger, but they still lacked the firepower to stand toe-to-toe with the Sylphari. However, what they did have was the element of surprise and the knowledge that their enemies had underestimated them. They had a weapon that the Sylphari could not have predicted: human ingenuity. The resistance was learning to use their abilities in ways the Sylphari could never anticipate. It was an advantage, and they were going to use it to the fullest. As Ilara stood in the command center, looking at the map of Earth, she knew the time had come. They had only one chance to strike at the Sylphari and prove that humanity was not a species to be dismissed so easily. The Sylphari had believed that their sheer power would be enough to subjugate Earth, but they had made a fatal mistake. Humanity had learned to adapt, to fight back, and soon, the Sylphari would learn just how dangerous they had made their enemy. The first shots had been fired, and the battle for Earth had begun in earnest. The moment of reckoning had arrived. The Resistance, united under one common goal, had spent countless days planning their most daring operation yet. They were no longer a scattered group of survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with, a united front capable of challenging the Sylphari. Their strategy was simple yet bold: to strike at the heart of the Sylphari's power, their command ship, the towering monolith that loomed above Earth like a dark god. If they could take it down, the Sylphari's control over the planet would crumble, and humanity would have a fighting chance. But it was a suicide mission, and they all knew it. Ilara stood at the forefront of the operation, her mind racing as she looked at the faces of the people around her. These were the ones who had awakened, the ones who had unlocked their true potential. Together, they had become more than just soldiers. They were warriors, each one more capable than the last. They had learned to use their abilities to their advantage, each one honing a different skill, each one a vital part of the plan. The assault on the Sylphari command ship would not be easy. The ship was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Its surface smooth and impervious to traditional weapons. It was protected by an energy shield so powerful that nothing short of an asteroid could breach it. But the Resistance had something the Sylphari didn't: knowledge. They had learned how to harness their powers in ways that defied the very laws of physics. What the Sylphari saw as invulnerable, the Resistance saw as a challenge. Ilara's mind shifted into focus as she prepared herself for the mission. Her heart pounded in her chest, and a quiet sense of determination filled her. This was the moment she had trained for, the moment where humanity would prove its worth or be wiped from existence. She felt the pulse of energy within her, the power that had been awakened inside her the day she first touched the artifact. She could feel it growing, deep in her core, as if it were calling her to action. The plan was set in motion. A small team of the most skilled awakened humans would board a ship designed to get them as close as possible to the Sylphari command ship. Once there, they would infiltrate the vessel, disable its shield generators, and plant a device that would trigger a catastrophic failure in the ship's core. It was a one-way mission, and the chances of success were slim. But if they succeeded, it would be the end of the Sylphari's dominance. As the team made their way to the launch site, the tension was palpable. The air seemed thick with anticipation, the weight of the mission pressing down on them. They boarded their ship, a sleek, heavily modified craft built from salvaged technology and awakened human ingenuity. The engines roared to life, and they shot into the sky, racing toward the enemy fleet. The journey to the Sylphari command ship was fraught with danger. As they neared the massive structure, the Resistance ship was detected, and the Sylphari immediately retaliated. Energy blasts rained down from the sky, narrowly missing their ship as they weaved and dodged the attacks. It was a fight for survival, but the Resistance fought with a strength born from desperation, using every ounce of their newfound abilities to keep the ship intact. Ilara could feel the energy coursing through her mind sharp as she directed the team, using her powers to deflect incoming blasts and protect the ship. Finally, they reached the outskirts of the command ship, hovering just outside its perimeter. The moment of truth had come. Ilara and the team made their way to the outer docking bay, where they would board the ship and begin the infiltration. The ship was vast, its dark corridors stretching into the unknown. As they moved forward, Ilara could sense the presence of the Sylphari, their cold, calculating minds watching their every move. The Resistance was no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to reclaim their world. Ilara's heart raced as they pressed deeper into the ship, the ticking clock counting down to their mission's final moment. The stakes had never been higher, and every step they took brought them closer to either victory or annihilation. The Sylphari had underestimated humanity's will to survive, but they would soon learn just how wrong they were. This was no longer just a fight for Earth's survival. It was a fight for its future. The corridors of the Sci-Fi command ship were eerily silent, the only sound the soft hum of its alien engines and the faint echo of footsteps as Ilara and the team moved deeper into the heart of the vessel. The team was well trained, each member focused on their task, but even with their powers, there was an underlying sense of dread. This was the enemy's stronghold, their fortress in the sky. The Sci-Fi were watching, and they were not going to make this easy. Ilara could feel it in the air, an oppressive force, a cold, calculating presence that seemed to hang over them like a shadow. The resistance had barely made it past the outer defenses, but the hardest part was yet to come. They were deep within enemy territory now, and every step they took brought them closer to the core of the ship, where the shield generators and the central control room lay. The team's objective was clear: disable the shift shield generators long enough to plant the device that would initiate the chain reaction. Once that was done, there would be no turning back. The ship would tear itself apart in a final act of defiance, a last blow to the invaders who had thought they could crush humanity with no effort at all. Ilara's mind was focused, but her heart pounded in her chest. She knew that the success of their mission depended on every single moment, every decision, and every action they took. They had one chance, and there would be no second chances. As they approached the central core, the resistance team encountered their first major obstacle, a heavily armored Sci-Fi patrol. The soldiers moved with precision, their bodies encased in advanced armor that gleamed in the dim light of the ship. They were formidable opponents, each one capable of overwhelming a human fighter with ease. But the resistance wasn't just any human force. They were awakened, harnessing powers that the Sci-Fi could not predict. Ilara's hands crackled with energy as she extended her will, manipulating the flow of air to create a whirlwind that knocked the first patrol member off balance. The team followed her lead, using their unique abilities to disarm and disable the Sci-Fi soldiers. Energy blasts tore through the air, and gravity seemed to bend under their control as they fought back with everything they had. Despite the odds, they were winning, fighting with a ferocity the Sci-Fi had never seen before. With the patrol neutralized, the team moved quickly to the central core, the heart of the ship's power. Ilara could feel the surge of energy in the air, a powerful pulse that seemed to emanate from deep within the ship. The shield generators were just ahead. The final obstacle stood before them, a massive security door, its surface pulsating with alien energy. Ilara, one of the resistance members, Rafe, called out, "Can you feel it? The energy source, it's massive. We're close." Ilara nodded, her mind already calculating the next steps. She extended her hand toward the security door, drawing on the energy that had become second nature to her. The door shimmered as it responded to her manipulation, the alien technology reacting to her presence. With a surge of power, she forced the door to open, its heavy bulk groaning as it split down the middle. Beyond the door lay the shield generators, massive structures that hummed with the pulse of the ship's power. The generators were the key to everything, and Ilara knew that once they were disabled, the ship would be vulnerable. She and the team moved into position, setting the device they had brought to trigger the destruction. It was a small but powerful device, capable of disrupting the very core of the ship's systems. Once activated, it would cause a cascade failure that would tear the ship apart. But just as they were about to plant the device, the ship shook violently. Ilara's heart skipped a beat as a wave of energy pulsed through the ship, knocking her to the ground. The Sci-Fi were onto them. A voice, cold and distant, echoed through the ship's intercom. "You dare challenge us? You have no hope." It was the Sci-Fi commander, their leader, speaking directly to Ilara. She could feel the malice in the words, the arrogance of an invader who believed themselves untouchable. But Ilara was no longer the frightened scientist she had been when the Sci-Fi first arrived. She was a fighter, a symbol of humanity's refusal to yield. With a defiant shout, Ilara activated the device, and the room exploded in a blaze of energy. The ship's shield generators faltered, their power flickering as the device began its countdown. The team had done it. The Sylphari were vulnerable. But as the countdown continued, Ilara knew this was only the beginning. The battle was far from over, and there were still more challenges ahead. The Sylphari would not fall easily, but humanity had proven that they were not to be underestimated. The fight for Earth had reached its climax, and there was no turning back now. The fall of the Sylphari's Titan had begun. The ship trembled violently as the countdown to the device's activation reached its final moments. Ilara felt the surge of power pulse through the air, the energy from the core cascading outward in shockwaves. She and the resistance team barely managed to hold their ground as the ship's systems began to fail, the once invincible shield generators flickering and dying. The Sylphari were no longer in control. "We've done it," Rafe gasped, his voice strained as he clutched his side where a wound had opened during the fight. "It's over." Ilara's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't allow herself to relax. The fight wasn't over yet. They had disabled the ship's shields, but the real challenge was still ahead. Escaping before the ship's imminent collapse. The countdown had begun, and the device was set to destroy the command ship from the inside out. The resistance had to make it out alive, and fast. "We need to get back to the ship now," Ilara ordered, her voice calm but urgent. She turned to the team, eyes locking with each one of them, urging them to move quickly. They had come too far to fail now. The team moved as one, their unity and focus a testament to everything they had endured to get this far. They fought their way through the collapsing corridors, the ship around them groaning in agony as it began to break apart. Each step was a race against time. They could feel the temperature rising, the air growing thin as the ship's atmosphere was compromised. Every minute felt like an eternity. But as they neared the docking bay, the ship shook with a force that nearly sent them sprawling. Ilara stumbled but caught herself, barely able to keep her footing. The walls seemed to buckle under the pressure, and alarms blared in the distance, signaling the impending destruction. "We're not going to make it," Rafe shouted, his voice tinged with panic as he glanced at Ilara. "Don't stop moving," Ilara snapped back. "We make it out, or we die trying." They pushed forward, ignoring the danger, the pounding in their chests, and the heat rising around them. When they reached the docking bay, their escape ship was waiting. Just a few more steps. But just as they neared the door, a shadow fell across them. The Sylphari commander had found them. "You think you can defeat us so easily?" The commander's voice echoed, its icy calmness contrasting with the chaos surrounding them. The commander was flanked by two towering Sylphari soldiers, their eyes glowing with the eerie light of their alien power. Ilara squared her shoulders, her body trembling with adrenaline and energy. The ship was falling apart around them, but there was still time. She could feel the power surging within her, like a fire waiting to be unleashed. She wasn't going to let the commander stop them now, not when they were so close. The Sylphari commander raised a hand, and a wave of energy shot toward Ilara. She barely had time to react, but as the blast neared her, she instinctively raised her own hand, deflecting the energy with a surge of her own. The shockwave sent them all sprawling to the ground, but Ilara recovered quickly, her mind clear and focused. She was not going to let this be the end. "Rafe, go," Ilara shouted. "Get to the ship now." Without hesitation, Rafe darted for the escape craft, but Ilara stayed behind, facing the Sylphari commander. The fight was inevitable. The Sylphari commander unleashed another powerful blast, but Ilara was ready. She summoned the energy around her, channeling it through her body, and in that moment, everything seemed to slow down. She could feel every particle of energy in the air, every movement, every thought. With a roar, she released the energy in a massive wave, pushing the commander and the soldiers back. The ship's alarms grew louder, the countdown approaching its final seconds. Ilara knew she didn't have much time. With one last look at the resistance ship, she turned and ran, using every ounce of her strength to reach safety. The The Silferi commander's voice echoed behind her, but it was fading, drowned out by the roar of the crumbling ship. Ilara leaped into the escape craft, and the doors sealed shut behind her. The engines roared to life, and the ship shot away from the dying command vessel, just as it exploded in a cataclysmic burst of energy. The shockwave rocked their craft, but they were free. As the team looked out the window at the fiery remains of the Silferi command ship, a sense of triumph settled over them. They had done it. Humanity had struck back. The invaders had been beaten, and the Earth was theirs once more. But even as they celebrated, Ilara's mind raced. The Silferi might have fallen, but their defeat was only the beginning. The resistance had proven that humanity could survive, that humanity could fight back. But what would come next? What had the Silferi known about the Earth that humanity still didn't understand? As the escape ship sped away into the stars, Ilara knew one thing. The battle for Earth might be over, but the war for humanity's future was just beginning.